Holy smokes, you're a long ways away, you guys. So Gord asked me to come and talk about this, fixing it ourselves, the need for rural leadership. You know, we've just gone through a day and a half of incredible stories about people who have done just exactly that. These were people who were in their community, they were awake, they were consciously aware of what was going on around them, and out of a genuine concern for their own communities, they did something. They did something. You know, these have been really powerful stories for me to help me to be a little more motivated and inspired and to instill belief and hope and to help me think bigger about my community. It'd be really fun to know what you got out of those different presentations. Maybe we can talk about that later. Now, what were the common nuggets? Because there were some in each one of them. Here were some that just popped out for me. These people were thinking outside the barn. They were focused on what was right and their strengths, where they were strong, as Peter said, rather than what was wrong. They were looking for solutions rather than focusing on problems. They were creating a bright vision of what they wanted their community to look like, to sound like, to feel like. And they had a shift from leader to leadership, where they were engaging and enlisting, tapping into the skills, the passions, the desires of other people in their community. And they had the courage to act, the courage to actually do something in their communities. This is really powerful stuff. And huge heartfelt thanks to all of you who came from near and far to share your stories, and I know there are going to be a few more after this session as well. Let's join our hands together in a big hand of applause for those people that came to share their stories. I think now would also be a really appropriate time to stop for a moment and to show some measurable, tangible proof that this stuff actually works. Where were you in 2006? Hell, I can't remember where I was last week. And if you remember where you were in 2006, who would ever have thought we would all have ended up here at a conference in Kelowna talking about rural development? Man. Now, if you actually read your program, you might have a little history on what happened. Way back in 2006, some local government leaders, some First Nations leaders got together in some obscure little meeting room in Merritt. And they came together because they were really concerned about, you know, the economic, the social, the environmental impacts of the mountain pine beetle epidemic that was going on right at that point in time. Who of you were there at that meeting? A few? Yeah. Let's make the story a little bit juicier. Let's just say they got together for a party to drink beer and to tell stories. You did. It's amazing what comes out of a celebration, isn't it? Yeah, these were people who were concerned about what was going on in their community. And rather than whining and blaming and complaining, they did something different. Led to the creation of the Southern Interior Beetle Action Coalition, which led to the Mountain Pine Beetle Assessment and Mitigation Plan, which when it finally got done and they actually had another party to actually read it, it showed them that there was clearly a much deeper problem, rural development. And they were left with that big question, how in the world do we instigate, invite, encourage, how do we get rural development happening in these communities when there was massive urbanization, you know, people leaving communities to get to the bigger cities, centralization of economic infrastructure, and very little concern, in fact, even some devastation of our fragile natural environment. How in the world do you do that? Well, since 2011, that's exactly what the members and the board and the staff of SIBAC have been doing. And they've been doing all kinds of things that most of us have no idea that have been going on. The BCRuralCentre.org, if you take nothing out of this conference but this, go look at that. Amazing communication platform. Gord talked about it, but take it that one step and go look at it yourself. They've been supporting, doing information sessions in lots of communities. They support all kinds of community initiatives like the Creston and District Community Investment Co-op. Woohoo! Great stuff that's going on. They do a whole bunch of other stuff behind the scenes. Thankless work. Why? Because they believe in you and me and the potential of what we can do in our communities. Let's give them a big hand. And a huge personal thank you to you, Gord, for your continual support and for your friendship that we've built and for actually bringing me back here to talk to these people. Holy smokes, I'm lucky. These are great stories that we've heard. Okay, come on. Cool stories. And you know, I want to take a moment, though, to, we're going to look at this. Where the hell was I going here? So let's take a moment to pause and reflect on some of the things that have happened and the things that we've seen throughout this day and a half, so that when we all leave here, we have the courage to act, to do something. You know, that courage to act, I'm kind of like Peter Kenyon. I like quotes. It reminds me of a quote by Helen Keller. Who knows anything about Helen Keller? What do you know about her?
Well, she had some abilities.
Some abilities, yeah. At a very, very young age, she became deaf and blind, and yet she went on to use her abilities to do some amazing things that have affected millions of people right across the globe. Helen Keller said something that ties in really well with why we're here. She said this: I'm only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do something that I can do. I will not refuse to do something that I can do. And in my mind, that's the reason why Gord brought all of these fabulous stories together, is so that you and I leave here with something that we all commit to do. I will not refuse to do something I can do. So let's take a moment to pause and reflect on some of the things that we've learned through the last day and a half. Peter Kenyon, what an amazing guy from Australia. He used the ABCDE model, asset-based, community-driven efforts. I like to come back to the ABCD model, and I don't want to be outdone by Peter, so I call it the ABCDEFGH model. Asset-based community development enhanced by friggin' good help. It's about working from the inside out. I mean, that's all we've got, is to work from the inside out from our communities. And he talks about how it all starts with conversation. And we had some great conversations yesterday where we got to know each other. Amazing. He never said this exactly, but this really, when we talk about rural development and economic development, here's something that was very clear in Peter's message as well, is that people do not live in an economy. They live in community, and community starts with people like you and me having conversations. Then John Davis, where he has proved not in just one community, but in two communities, how you can use arts to bring people together, to include people, to engage them, and not to create an art gallery in a building, but to create a community-wide art gallery. What an amazing concept. By creating that community vision, something that people believed in. It was about, they had sort of a philosophy, something that was deeper, something that touches the heart. When you have that in place, well, that people are creative and they're innovative. Then you need some strategy, I guess, to put it all in gear. But some of the more important pieces is having the will to do it and the determination, and then to have the presentation. It's all about stories and getting people involved in those stories. That's what touches the hearts. I just love the idea of the $1 day where you actually pay people to come to your events. That's a really cool deal. And the Think Off, I think we could have more of those. Niels Christofferson, amazing story, about place-based collaboration, all about collaboration, and how to think of what we do as stewardship economies, We're placed on this planet. We don't own anything really. All we are is stewards of the resources that we have. So let's work together and make the best of them. And to give us all the permission to play a little bit, to tinker, to experiment, to build with ethics and morals and values and tying into local skills. And Bert, from up at the Nisga'a Nation up north of Terrace, incredible the shared vision that they've developed there for sustainable prosperity in their nation for today, but I like to add the tomorrow on there too, because I think that's what he talked about a lot, where they're using the foundation or the fund that they've got to promote entrepreneurs, to support entrepreneurs, to start businesses that then creates jobs. It helps other businesses in the community, ties it all together, and it's really all about increasing citizens' quality of life. That's what our communities are all about. Mary Bosch this morning with the Rural Development Initiatives, and she was talking about economic vitality, and yet that was just sort of the upper sort of philosophy, the idea. She was going right to the bottom level of the pyramid to talk about human capital, human development. By cultivating those leaders and developing that capacity. How? By getting people talking. And maybe more importantly, listening. And what that does is catalyzes action. And I love the idea of creating these 90-day projects or games where people see some quick wins as a result of their efforts. I think we can use that in my community. Maggie Donnan this morning, oh man, what a great story how she engages people, not just the farmers, but the whole community, to get engaged with the story of their food. It's more than just the food, but it's about how that food is produced and who produces it. People want to know more about their food. And to think about our land and our air and our water, the fragile things that we all depend on our survival, especially in a society where most people, all they know about their food is that it comes from the grocery store. There's a great way to tie it back to the farmers and the way that they're supporting the new generation of farmers to help them through those first couple tough years as they get into business. I wish I'd have known about them when I was farming. It was about leveraging the intellectual capital that is so abundant in our communities. And Sarah Calhoun, what an amazing story with that great catchy name of Red Ants Pants and how they took that and used that as that opportunity in the community to put White Sulphur Springs on the map by bringing in thousands of people for music festivals and how that supported other business ventures in their community. The idea of her business idea about developing it on integrity, production at home, and having it personal and fun. Because if it's not fun, to hell with it. Not worth the time. And we need each other. And it was real proof that working together, we can do big things in small towns. Small towns, I don't know how you would classify that. Probably anything less than 10,000 people, something like that. All of these stories really came back to this. It's about quality of life in our community, which is equal to the quality of relationships, and it all starts with conversation. And I so appreciate what we've gone through here in the last day and a half and the conversations that we've had to really connect at a much deeper level than just economics. So let's come back to this. I will not refuse to do something that I can do. All of the stories that we heard of, none of those could have happened unless people did this. They were thinking outside the barn, they shifted from leader to leadership, and they had the courage to act. And I guarantee that if you go away from here with one or two things that you act on based on these, I guarantee you will see positive results in your community. How do I know? Story time. Story time. Prior to this conference, how many of you have heard about or know anything about Sangudo Opportunity Development Co-op? Oh man, I wish I could get a picture of this. There are more people in here that know about it than in my own community. I guess we got to get better at tooting our own horn, don't we? Now, I'm not going to bore you with the whole story of how this all transpired because many of you have heard about it. And no, I'm not going to sing any trooper songs, at least maybe not till later. Maybe we'll raise a little hell later. Instead, we'll talk about some of the behind the scenes things that made this all happen. But I'll give you a little bit of information, a little bit of context about my community. Who of you has been to Sangudo? Did you go there on purpose?
Yeah. Had to go to the bathroom.
Beautiful entranceway into Sangudo, little community about an hour west and a little bit north of Edmonton in Alberta. But when you get into it, well, it's kind of like Donnybrook. Ugly. Or at least it was. But a really, really great community. Sangudo is small. According to the 2016 Statistics Canada survey, 299 people live in the hamlet of Sangudo. It's funny, I thought there were more than that. There must have been a bunch of kids hiding under the bridge that day. But anyway, it's a small little community. Rural community, primarily agriculture around it, grain and mostly different varieties of livestock. And I would guess that probably about 1,500 people call Sangudo home. Small and distance is our problem. Now, different than Sarah. Sarah talked about how White Sulphur Springs is 100 miles away from anything. Our problem is we're too bloody close. I mean, it's only 45 minutes to the police station in Spruce Grove to the east and 45 minutes to the police station in Whitecourt to the north and west.
Why does everyone go to the police station?
Did I say police station? I meant Tim Hortons. But it shows you how easy it is for people in my community to jump in their four-wheel drive trucks, and there's lots of them, and they'll drive right down our street, past all of our shops, right on Main Street, and they'll drive 2 or 3 hours round trip and $100 in gas to go to the closest Walmart where they can save $2 on the staples of life. You know, the things that we absolutely need to survive, like pop and chips. Stuff that we call it retail leakage because it's money that's generated right in our community that is slipping out through our gates and buying stuff that could have been bought right in our community. It's sick, and it goes on in all of our rural communities. It's awful. Small and dying, or so it seemed. And yet, since 2010, in the 7 years since we incorporated SODC, we've collected and injected and circulated close to $1 million of local money into 6 different projects. Now, $1 million isn't a lot of money. I mean, for some of you, that's pocket change. But in Sangudo, that's way more than the whole rest of the hamlet is worth. First project that some of you have heard about, we helped with the transition of a business from older entrepreneurs to younger entrepreneurs to make sure we kept that business in the community really, really important in our community. The next project, we supported a couple entrepreneurs to start a brand new business, Connections Coffee House. Very much needed in our community. It's that safe place where people can come together to talk, to have conversation. Our third project, we supported a major renovation and upgrade to Sangudo Custom Meat Packers. The shop itself was really in bad shape, and with the help of some government funding, Growing Forward program, we supported that with a fairly large chunk of money. So that is now a world-class meat processing facility in Alberta. Our next project, no, that's the 6th project. The 4th project, let me go back. The 4th project, we supported the guys at the meat shop to do a major restructuring of their finances, roll all of their loans and everything together into one where now they own the meat shop and the business, and SODC holds a mortgage on it. Our 5th project, we bought 3 residential lots within the hamlet of Sangudo because housing is a big challenge for us in our community. And the 6th project is this brand new 1,360 square foot home right in Sangudo, beautiful sloping lot, walkout basement, beautiful view, 2 blocks to Main Street, beautiful community, and I know that some of you want to move to Sangudo, don't you? It'll be up on the market within the next couple of weeks. You got to talk to me because you'll love the community. I know you will. It's probably the best community other than the one you live in. So only $1 million. But it's been significant on what it's done not only for SODC, but for the entire community. Now, none of this could have happened without people thinking outside the barn, the shift from leader to leadership, and the courage to act. So now we're at a point in time where we have a choice to make. What do you want? Do you want me to tell you the feel-good group hug, let's sit on the floor, hold hands, and sing Kumbaya story? Or do you want to hear about the humps and the bumps and some of the challenges and how we got over them and some things that'll cause you grief in your community and how to get over them? What do you want, group hug or rocky road? I thought so. Okay, so here's the Batman, poof, pow, wham, Zippo story. You're going to get the whole works. Rural development is tough, damn tough. It is bloody tough to get people together to talk about this stuff. It is really tough to get people to even think outside of their fences and to look at their community in a bigger way. It's really tough to get people to hang their egos on the coat rack and to look about what's important for us in our community, what can help enhance the quality of life. It's really tough to motivate people to do anything. In fact, you can't motivate people. That's got to come from within. It's really tough to get people talking and having conversations about what they want their community to be. It's tough, isn't it? But it's a whole lot easier if you've got somebody that believes in you. Right from the get-go, when we started down this path, we've always had an organization that was there to believe in us. Right from the time we got started, we had Alberta Recreation and Parks Association where they believed on us. They gave us some information, a lot of direction, some support. The Alberta Community and Cooperative Association, some of these organizations, they pushed our hot buttons to help us think differently, and that ticked us off, but it drove us on. Sometimes we were able to gain some funding. More than likely, we were able to leverage some of what they had to get us what we needed and wanted. But we always had an intermediary organization there that said, we believe in you. This is really good stuff. This is so important. Keep on. And we, and me personally, I'm incredibly thankful and appreciative for the Alberta Recreation and Parks Association with their ACE Communities program, which was a leadership and community development program. And then when we started doing more economic development stuff, it was the Alberta Community and Cooperative Association. They pushed our buttons, but they were always there to say that they believed in us. And from an outside perspective, I believe that you are incredibly fortunate here in the interior of BC to have SIBAC and the BC Rural Centre to believe in you, to be there to help, to lead, to give you direction, the support, the stuff that's there for you. And they don't have to push your hot buttons. Instead, Gord asked me to come and do that instead. You know, I think that when I think back about when we first started, and in 2005, Northern Gateway Regional School Division threatened to close our high school. And for those of you in small communities, you probably know that the closing of a high school is, well, it's like another nail in the coffin for your community. Well, that really hurt. It was a major crisis for us. And yet we look back on that as the event that really sparked us to change our attitudes and decide that we needed to do something in our community. We started looking outside of our community. You know, we were looking for some government program or some government grant or an outside developer or somebody else that was going to come in and fix us for it, to make it better for us. And just so that you know, that's a waste of time and energy, because that's just not going to happen. If it's our community, we need to do something about it. However, in our looking outside of the community, we did find the Alberta Recreation and Parks Association that gave us some support, some coaching, some direction, and it was about us taking charge of our community. And we leveraged some of their resources and called a great big community meeting and brought in a gentleman named Ian Hill. Great guy. You got to Google him. He's done some amazing stuff with big and small communities right across North America. He came to this meeting and he got people kind of fired up about doing some rural development stuff. But doggone it, he said something that hurt. My community is a direct reflection of me. In other words, if there's a child in my community that is not receiving a proper education, that's a direct reflection of me. If there are families in my community that don't have safe, comfortable homes and enough to eat, that's a direct reflection of me. If there are people that don't have year-round meaningful work, that's a direct reflection of me. If there are businesses closing down, that's a direct reflection of me. Ooh, that hurt. How does that relate to you and your community? He also used that quote by Helen Keller, "I will not refuse to do something that I can do." The other thing that we learned as we headed down this path is that nobody else cares. Nobody else cares about Sangudo. Nobody else cares about your community. At least not as much as you do. We learned that if there was something going on in our community, it was up to us to create our own destiny. We had to do it for ourselves. Just like Sarah did in Little White Sulphur Springs. We also had this shift from leader to leadership. You know, we all need a leader in our community, don't we? You know, we need that person that is strong and knowledgeable and wise, that person who can give us direction, execute a plan, keep people working together, direct us on, make sure everything's on track. We all need a leader like that, don't we? No, we don't need a leader. We learned in our community, and I've seen it in many other communities too, where great ideas, great initiatives, great plans that were led by a leader, and they end badly. Why? Well, usually because that person's ego gets in the way. You know, it becomes about them, or it becomes about some personal gain or reward or recognition or to lead to an elected position. But it usually ends badly because people don't buy in when the ego gets in the way. We learned, but we had a big problem, a really big problem. We were looking for that. We thought we needed a leader, and Rick was our guy. Rick was our guy. If we could just get Rick involved, everything would be fine. Rick's a smart businessman. He started and run and sold several businesses in our community and in other communities. He knows how to handle people, he knows how to handle money, and he's got a lot of money. If we could just get Rick involved, everything would be fine. So we shared with Rick what was going on, and we waited, and we invited him to a meeting, and another one, and another one, and we waited. And we asked him to meet us for coffee. And we waited. Oh, he was kind and respectful, but he had no interest in working with us in any way. So what did we do then? We pouted. What were we going to do now? But then we remembered we will not refuse to do something we can do. We didn't need a leader, we just needed leadership. We just needed to chunk down our big problem into smaller little tasks and duties that we could do. And we could tap into the skills and the passions of people right in our community. In fact, the people that were sitting at our table. Oh, we had some amazing fun. I mean, Jeff and Carol, they were incredible visionaries. Get them together, give them a glass of wine, and holy smokes, the ideas had come out. Some good ones, some weird ones, some really wacky ones. And it was just, you can't stop them. And Lloyd and I, we were able to sift through all of that and take out little bits and pieces and join them all together and think, okay, here we could do this, we could do this, and we could do this. Bruce and David, they were the logistics guys. They could say, oh yeah, well, we do this first, and we bring these people here and put this here. And Heather and Shelley, they were great to connect people and bring people the help that we needed when we needed it. And Carol and Maureen always made sure we had lots to eat and something to drink. And Heather, bless her heart, she could always find the holes in everything that we did. Much as it ticked us off, we were always able to put our heads together and come up with a different way, a more creative way, to come up with the best solution, better than any of us thought of on our own. In fact, we had built this solid relationship and still have it where we all know and like and trust each other so well that we invite and we encourage people with dissenting ideas and differences of opinions. And we even like to talk to the naysayers in our communities to find out what they've got for us. As much as it hurts sometimes, we know that we can always find a better way to get over and around those things to create the solutions that we really, really need. Now, one of this leadership idea, it's about tapping into and enlisting the skills, the desires, tapping into the emotional, the social, the intellectual, the financial, and even the spiritual capital of people sitting right in our table. We also learned that we don't want a huge big group, but you need more than one. These competent, courageous leaders, you've got to have at least 3. Peter mentioned yesterday that it's, to have these conversations, 5, 6 is probably about the max. That's what we've found. And working in other communities, I've found it's the same way. When you get these people, they're competent, courageous, they're servant leaders, and they're looking outside of themselves at something bigger than themselves. It's not about their own egos, their own businesses, their own jobs. This is bigger than that. It's really important to have this many, because if you've just got 1 or 2, and they go out into the community and they share some ideas, and you can bet your boots that some naysayer's going to knock the soup out of them, kick the wind out of their sails, send them away with their tail between their legs. They lose hope, they lose belief. And yet when you got 2 or 3, well, then everybody can work together to buoy them back up, and away you go again. These people they've got expansive energy. They work, they're energetic, and their energy builds exponentially when they work with others. The huge levels of trust. And accountable. They say what they're going to do, and you know darn well that they're going to do it. No ifs, ands, buts. There's no excuses. It's going to happen. They love their humanness. What I mean by this is that they know they're going to screw up. But it's not a failure. It's just a great opportunity to learn and to move on. They're credible, they're passionate, they're persuasive, they're trustworthy. These are the people that if you decided you were going to have a work bee tomorrow and you called one of these people, well, heck, they could have 40 people showing up tomorrow with gloves and wheelbarrows and shovels and power saws ready to do the work. Great connectors. We've got these people in our community, and you've got them in your community. In fact, I bet if I asked you to give me names, you could probably give 3, 4, 5 of these names right off the top of your head. And since you're here, I'm guessing you're one of those too. And I acknowledge you for your being here and for your willingness to do this kind of stuff. Sometimes it seems thankless, but it is so worth the effort. Another thing that we learned a lesson was that it's so important for this leadership group to be doing it as volunteers. I have seen many, many areas where different communities where these sorts of economic or rural development ideas have been driven by or pulled together by an economic development officer or a community future staff or a counselor or a staff of some municipality, and they usually fail. Now, if you were paying attention, what did I say a moment ago about failure? Opportunity to learn. So what's the learning here? Well, if it's one of those people that they're doing it as part of their job, if it's their job, pretty soon people won't do anything because it's his job, it's her job to take care of doing it. And yet if that person is very clear about taking off their volunteer hat or taking off their job hat and putting on the volunteer hat, then it can work really, really well. Maybe it's just in small communities like ours, but that's the experience that we've had. These volunteers, it takes volunteering to a whole new level because it takes hundreds, maybe thousands of hours to do some of this work. And yet when people give of their heart and they're the holders of that vision, it's amazing what can happen. Yes, there's going to be economic benefits all the way around, but the reason they do it is from the heart as volunteers. Here's the secret sauce of why this stuff works. It's in the community, by the community, and for the community. People taking charge of their own community, their own resources, and doing what they need to do for the betterment of all. This is about creating high quality of life. And again, to repeat, we can get stuck on economic development, and yet if we keep this in mind, that people don't live in an economy, they live in a community. It's all about, how many times did we see yesterday with Peter's different stories where it had these big yellow community signs of all those people? That's what makes it work. And here's what happens, once you start one project, it's amazing how it sparks other little activity in the community as well. You take on a project to do a festival. Well, it helps, people start to clean up their businesses, and they maybe do some different things that help, new businesses and hot dog stands and hamburger stands and arts displays and all kinds of other stuff starts to happen all around it. It stimulates sort of an independence and autonomy in the community. Creates jobs. It's a huge, important way to have this succession of businesses from older entrepreneurs to younger entrepreneurs, which is a huge, big challenge right across North America. They're calling it the silver tsunami, where the silver-hairs are trying to figure out a way to get out of their businesses. This is a great way where a community can support it. Helps those young entrepreneurs to get into it. As Maggie was talking about, how they're tying into the intellectual capital of the older farmers to help some of the new generation farmers. Gets people actively and engaged in the community and what goes on. And it creates this sense of fierce pride and well-being in a community. And it's guaranteed to happen, but it takes a spark, something to get it going. I will not refuse to do something I can do. So we've talked about thinking outside the barn a little bit, creating that bright vision of where you're going, about the shift from leader to leadership, which then leaves this courage to act. When I first started putting this presentation together, I thought that this courage to act was a really, really big thing. And I read about some of the other stories from these other presenters, and then hearing them, I thought, wow, that takes huge courage to do that stuff. Like it was a jumping off a cliff kind of an experience. And yet if you chunk it down to the micro level, all of those stories were just a culmination of thousands and thousands and thousands of daily little small duties and chores and actions that resulted in these great big changes. So the courage is not some big thing. It's about the courage to do those small daily little duties. It's about having the courage to not refuse to do something I can do. This is about habit change. It's about having the courage to pick up the phone and call somebody to ask for some help. It's about having the courage to do a little bit of research on the internet, about arranging a meeting. Little things that every one of us can do. It takes courage, but it's worth the effort. It's having the courage to be vulnerable, to say, I don't know. This is going on and I don't know what to do about it. But I'm going to find out. And that's the courageous part. To go out into the community and say, what do you think? What's important here? And then to listen to them as if their answers mattered. We heard that yesterday from Peter. Really listening with care. It's about having the vulnerability and the courage to ask for help. I don't know about you, but I think most of us were probably raised to do it self. Be independent, find your own way. So it takes huge courage to ask. But when we do, it's amazing the support and the help that's in all of our communities. All we need to do is ask for help. It's amazing what can come out of the weeds. The courage to step into now. We have to plan and have that big, bright vision out there. But to truly step into now and be present and here now, and to treat myself and my neighbors and my friends with care and respect, really, it's just love. How do we create greater love in our communities? Love for our communities and love for each other and our fellow man. And the courage to prioritize. In our fast-paced, high-tech world, it can be very easy to become a slave of our tools. Get caught up with our phones and computers and TVs and all of this stuff that we have. But to prioritize about what can I do now that's going to have an effect on my community, the people that I care about and that I love. That's the courage. And the courage is just to say this, I will not refuse to do something that I can do. Another courageous piece that we've found is to have the courage to celebrate. Peter talked about having a party to bring people together to have conversation. It can be so easy to get caught up in the daily tasks and doing stuff, and we do it, check another thing off the list, but we've got to stop and take the time to really look around and celebrate what we have and what we've created, and to just have fun with it. Otherwise, it just is another job, and I don't think any one of us want another job. We schedule celebrations in Sangudo. We'll make sure our meetings end on time so that we can just sit around and BS and get to know each other a little bit better. We schedule family games days with our group. We schedule time to bring our families and go on a float down the river and have a barbecue. It's just about getting together and really connecting with each other and having those conversations. It's really the base of all of this stuff. Before we get to the end of this, I just want to share a few quick barriers to success that we've experienced and maybe some ways to get over them. I may have talked about some of these already. However, just so that you're aware of them, it's so easy in communities to get caught up in the technical stuff. How do we get this incorporated? What are the Securities Commission's rules? What are the legal pieces? What are the technical, strategic plans and all of that stuff, the business planning that needs to happen? It can really cause analysis paralysis. The important part is the culture. Once you get the people together, you get the culture built, those strong, powerful relationships, the rest of it all can just happen, and you'll find a way to make that happen. It can be really easy to get a project done and then to sit back. There, we got that done. And the days go by, and the weeks go by, and the months go by. Complacency sucks. It really does. We need to find a way to keep the momentum and find a new project, even if it's a little one, but just to keep people engaged and involved. Egos get in the way. I don't know how to get around this one. I know we have meetings and we're looking at business ideas and projects, and we get talking about, investment and returns of investment and exit strategies and all this other stuff. And then finally some person in our group will say, whoa, just hang on a second here. What's most important for us in our community? It helps us to just check our egos aside. Let's talk about this as people. Lack of leadership. We need to find ways to tie into this experiences, the strengths, the knowledge, the wisdom that we have in our community, rather than it being led by one person. And again, it's fabulous if these things are started by somebody where it's their job, but then for that person to be very clear and aware about when they take off their job hat and put on the volunteer hat. We need to look at all of these projects with an entrepreneurial spirit. There's just something powerful about rural communities in particular that have that grassroots entrepreneurial spirit. You can get through anything with that spirit, an ability to take some risks and to play and to experiment and to tinker, knowing that you're going to learn some things along the way. Sometimes it hurts, but you always find another way to get through it. Again, the entrepreneurial spirit helps when it comes to the hurdles so that you find a way under it, over it, around it, or through it. A fear of failure will keep you stuck in your tracks. And yet, with that entrepreneurial spirit, the big vision in mind, people looking for that vision and moving that way, take that step, one little step at a time. And failure is just a great opportunity to learn. We've found in our community that if we don't take the time to celebrate, people don't feel valued, they don't feel appreciated, they don't feel like what they've done has really made a difference. So we just go out of our way to create celebration for the things that go on. Seed capital can be a big thing. Sometimes, once you've got an idea, there's oftentimes that intermediary organization that may provide a little money to get you going, to provide that little belief in what you're doing. Maybe it's SIBAC, maybe it's a bank, maybe it's a little bit of funding through your district. There's oftentimes money set aside to help with these sorts of things if you've got a good idea. And if not, you've got a good idea, we found in our community, people will chip money in just to see it get going. Sure, they might risk it, they might lose it, but it's a good learning opportunity. So I've got a few closing comments, but before I do that, any questions about how this all works and how it relates to you?